The high-pitched whine of the drone was a symphony of precision in Ethan Vance's ears. Every rotor beat a pulse of urgency as he navigated his custom-built quadcopter through the dense suburban labyrinth of Elmwood Pines. Below, a figure darted. Between manicured hedges and behind carefully placed decorative boulders, Marcus Thorne, a man whose rap sheet was as long as his last name was common, now wanted for a string of violent robberies culminating in a hostage situation that had turned sour just hours ago. Ethan, a former Air Force drone operator now lending his unmatched skills to the local police department on a voluntary basis, felt the familiar thrill of the hunt mixed with the grim weight of the stakes. He's heading for the community park, Perimeter, Unit 3. Ethan's voice was calm, steady, feeding real-time coordinates into his comms. Looks like he's aiming for the stormwater drain access northeast corner. On the monitor, the fugitive, a blur of panicked motion, scrambled over a low fence, his face momentarily visible, a mosaic of fear and desperation. Police sirens, still distant but growing louder, were the only other sound besides the drone's insistent hum, a sound Ethan had learned to filter out, focusing solely on the grid lines of his screen, the thermal signature of his target, and the critical milliseconds of reaction time. This wasn't just a technical exercise, it was a race against time, a desperate attempt to bring a dangerous individual to justice before he could vanish into the concrete jungle or worse, inflict further harm. The fugitive, surprisingly agile for his size, used every cover available. A row of ornamental dogwood trees, the blind spots of backyard sheds, the narrow alleys between perfectly aligned two-story houses. Ethan's fingers danced across the controls, a ballet of nuanced movements keeping the drone perfectly aligned, adjusting for wind gusts and the sudden dips in elevation. He's got a clear path for approximately 50 yards, then he's going to hit the old Miller property fence line. Unit 3, be ready for a breach, he's not slowing down. He saw Unit 3's patrol car screeching around a corner, closing in fast, their blue and red lights painting the pristine lawns in a frantic, pulsating glow. The trap was set, the net tightening. Marcus Thorne, unaware of the aerial eye tracking his every move, was running straight into it. Ethan felt a surge of professional satisfaction. This was what his years of training, his thousands of hours, flying, were for. The fugitive was almost within visual range for the ground units, just a few more seconds, a few more controlled movements, and this dangerous chase would be over. Then, a sudden, unexpected silhouette appeared directly beneath, the drone, interrupting its perfect line of sight. It was a woman, impeccably dressed, standing on a meticulously manicured lawn, her arms crossed, a severe expression marring her otherwise pleasant features. Mrs. Evelyn Thorne, the notorious head of the Elmwood Pines Homeowners Association, a woman known more for her unwavering adherence to archaic bylaws than for any discernible sense of community spirit. Her voice, thin but piercing, cut through the calm static, reaching Ethan through the drone's sensitive microphones. "What in the name of civility is that contraption doing over my property? This is a clear violation of privacy. HOA bylaw. Section 4, Article B, subsection 7, explicitly prohibits unmanned aerial vehicles over residential lots without written consent." Ethan, momentarily stunned by the absurdity, tried to interject. "Ma'am, this is a police operation. We are tracking a dangerous fugitive. Please, stand clear." His voice, amplified through the drone's external speaker, was met with a dismissive wave of her hand. "Police operation or not, this is a privacy infringement," she shrieked, her face reddening. "I will not have it. My garden club meeting starts in 20 minutes and I will not tolerate this aerial surveillance." Before Ethan could respond, before he could process the sheer audacity, he saw it, a glint of metal in her hand, a small, dark object. She raised it and with a surprisingly strong arm hurled it directly at the drone. It was a rock, a perfectly sized landscaping stone propelled with surprising accuracy. Time seemed to slow. Ethan saw the impact on his screen, a blur of pixels, then a violent shudder. The high-pitched whine of the rotors immediately changed, a grating, choking sound, followed by an ominous silence. The image on his monitor pixelated, then fragmented, breaking into a kaleidoscope of digital snow before finally going black. His drone, his precision instrument, the very eyes of the police in this crucial moment, was dead. It spiraled out of control, a broken bird, plummeting toward the carefully tended azaleas below. A stunned silence fell over the police radio, quickly replaced by frantic shouts. "Drones down! Repeat, drones down! We've lost visual!" Ethan slammed his fist on the control desk, a wave of frustrated fury washing over him. He stared at the blank screen, then at the frozen image of Mrs. Thorne, still standing defiant, her chest heaving, a triumphant, almost insane gleam in her eyes. "You idiot! Do you have any idea what you just did?" he roared, his voice cracking with a mixture of disbelief and rage. Mrs. Thorne, unmoved, smoothed down her skirt. "I protected my privacy, young man, and the privacy of this entire community. There are rules, and they apply to everyone." But her self-righteousness was a bitter taste in the mouth of every officer now scouring the streets on foot. The sirens grew fainter, the pursuit dissolving into a frantic, uncoordinated search. Somewhere in the growing distance, the faint sound of crashing through dense underbrush confirmed their worst fears. Marcus Thorne, the dangerous fugitive, had vanished. He was gone, swallowed by the suburban landscape, thanks to one woman's rigid, unyielding, and utterly disastrous interpretation of privacy. The silence that followed was heavy with the weight of failure, the bitter taste of a victory snatched away, all because of an HOA manager who prioritized an antiquated bylaw over public safety. The legal documents arrived with startling efficiency, delivered by a grim-faced process server just hours after the drone's demise. Ethan Vance stared at the official papers, his name splashed across the page. HOA of Elmwood Pines vs. Ethan Vance, accusing him of property damage, invasion of privacy, reckless endangerment, and a slew of nuisance complaints. Mrs. Evelyn Thorne, through her formidable and clearly well-funded legal counsel, wasn't just going for a slap on the wrist. She wanted a public precedent, a grandstanding affirmation of her dominion over Elmwood Pines, even at the cost of public safety. The sheer audacity of it, while Marcus Thorne, a known and dangerous fugitive, was still at large because of her actions, made a cold fury churn in Ethan's gut. His own attorney, a pro bono contact from his Air Force days who'd quickly stepped in, was sympathetic but cautious. "Ethan, this is a mess. Legally, she has a leg to stand on regarding private airspace. The police operation complicates it, but doesn't necessarily grant you carte blanche over private property. We need to tread carefully." The emphasis on private property felt like a direct insult, a dagger to Ethan's sense of duty. The police department, caught in a swirling vortex of public scrutiny and legal ambiguity, found themselves in an unenviable position. Captain Davies, a man who respected Ethan's skills and commitment, had called him into his office the next morning, the air thick with tension. "Look, Ethan, we're doing everything we can. We've vouched for your actions, confirmed you were operating under our direct guidance, but the department counsel is advising caution. We can't officially condone reckless endangerment or property damage, especially when the case is heading to civil court. It makes us look bad, and it could set a dangerous precedent." The captain's frustration was palpable, etched into the lines around his eyes. "We need to catch Thorne, but every unit we divert to this legal squabble is a unit not looking for him. You're invaluable, Ethan, but right now, you're a lightning rod." The police couldn't abandon him, but they also couldn't fully support him, in a way that would open them up to further litigation. Ethan understood the bind, but it chafed at his soul. He'd helped them, only to be hung out to dry by the very system he'd tried to aid. The incident exploded across every conceivable media platform. Local news channels ran endless loops of blurry drone footage, the impact, and Mrs. Thorne's an impassioned, albeit shrill defense of her rights. National news picked up the story, framing it as a sensational debate. Privacy versus public safety. Big Brother drone versus the American homeowner. Talk shows blared heated arguments. Some pundits decried the surveillance state and championed Mrs. Thorne as a bastion of constitutional liberty, while others condemned her as a selfish obstructionist who had endangered the community by aiding a criminal's escape. Social media, a chaotic arena of instant judgment, was ablaze. Ethan's personal accounts were flooded with messages, vitriolic hate from privacy advocates and fervent support from citizens fed up with bureaucratic overreach. He found himself a reluctant public figure, his face plastered on screens, his actions dissected by millions who understood neither the nuance of drone operation nor the desperate urgency of a fugitive hunt. The sheer volume of noise was deafening, a cacophony that both infuriated and paradoxically invigorated him. His frustration was a physical ache, a constant knot in his stomach. The drone, his eye in the sky, was now impounded as evidence, its broken shell a mocking reminder of his failure. Marcus Thorne was still out there, a shadow haunting the city, and Ethan felt a crushing personal responsibility. He couldn't actively search for the fugitive, not without risking further legal trouble and undermining the police's already delicate position. He was sidelined, a master craftsman without his tools, a shepherd whose flock was scattering, while he was tangled in barbed wire. He couldn't shake the image of Thorne disappearing, couldn't forget the triumphant smirk on Mrs. Thorne's face. The legal battle, as absurd as it seemed, became a proxy war. He wouldn't just defend himself. He would fight for the principle. He would prove that his actions were justified, necessary. His determination hardened, transforming the raw frustration into a quiet, simmering resolve. He was going to find out what really happened that day, not just what was on the surface. With his main drone unusable, Ethan turned to his home setup, a less powerful but still capable surveillance system, and started reviewing his extensive archives. He had thousands of hours of cached footage from previous test flights, routine neighborhood surveillance he sometimes did for fun, or even just old personal videos. He focused on the Elmwood Pines area, specifically around Mrs. Thorne's residence, reviewing days, then weeks, leading up to the incident. Most of it was mundane. Mrs. Thorne tending her prize-winning hydrangeas, neighbors walking dogs, the occasional Amazon delivery. But then, as he fast-forwarded through late-night hours from 2 weeks prior, something caught his eye. A vehicle. It was a dark, nondescript van, windows tinted, pulling into the cul-de-sac around 2 a.m. It parked briefly near Mrs. Thorne's residence, no lights on, then drove off within minutes. What made him pause wasn't just the unusual hour or the van itself, but a distinctive, almost imperceptible dent on the rear passenger door, illuminated only by the faint glow of a distant street lamp. He zoomed in, enhancing the image as best he could. The dent was a perfect crescent-shaped indentation. He remembered seeing that exact dent in a police briefing video, a blurry image of a getaway vehicle used in a previous robbery attributed to Marcus Thorne's crew from months ago, an incident that hadn't resulted in an arrest for the vehicle. It was too subtle to be a direct link, too fleeting to be definitive evidence, but it was there, a quiet anomaly. Mrs. Thorne, the rigid enforcer of HOA rules, supposedly so concerned with privacy, had a ghost of a criminal connection briefly, parking outside her pristine home in the dead of night, weeks before her sudden, fierce defense of her airspace. Ethan leaned closer to the screen, a new kind of chill running down his spine. This wasn't just about privacy anymore. This was about something much, much darker. The crescent-shaped dent in the dark van from his old drone footage gnawed at Ethan. It was too specific, too coincidental to be dismissed. The image of Evelyn Thorne, rigid and self-righteous, ordering his drone shot down, now merged with the unsettling notion of her house as a clandestine waypoint for a criminal. This wasn't just about an overzealous HOA manager. This was about something far more sinister. With his main drone still impounded, Ethan relied on his old, less conspicuous mini-drone, the kind designed for recreational flying, but in his hands, a discreet tool for urban reconnaissance. He couldn't fly it openly over Elmwood Pines, but he could use it for close-quarters surveillance, discreetly launching it from neighboring streets or public parks to observe Evelyn Thorne's property from ground level, looking for patterns, anomalies. His first few days of surveillance were tedious. Evelyn maintained her meticulous routine, gardening, attending HOA meetings, walking her perfectly groomed poodle. But Ethan noticed subtle shifts. Her house lights would sometimes flicker on in the dead of night, just for a few minutes. Deliveries arrived at odd hours, not from standard couriers, but nondescript white vans that lingered a moment too long. He also observed her interactions with certain residents. She was always prim, always polite, but there was an underlying tension, a way people seemed to defer to her beyond the usual HOA deference. He started cross-referencing names, anyone she spent more than a fleeting moment with, any vehicles that seemed out of place. His laptop became a hub of maps, public records, and social media deep dives. He wasn't just looking for Marcus Thorne. He was looking for why Evelyn Thorne had facilitated his escape. Ethan's breakthrough came not from aerial surveillance but from old land records and a seemingly innocuous piece of information from his pro bono lawyer who was digging into the HOA's legal history. The lawyer had mentioned a convoluted series of property transfers and easement grants that had recently been pushed through by the HOA board, primarily spearheaded by Evelyn. They involved a forgotten, overgrown parcel of land bordering Elmwood Pines, a section that technically fell outside the main jurisdiction of the HOA, but which Evelyn had aggressively sought to bring under their protective umbrella. It was a swampy, undesirable plot, long dismissed as undevelopable. Why the sudden interest? Ethan accessed old county topographical maps and overlaid them with the flight path Marcus Thorne had taken during the chase. The fugitive's escape route, the very stormwater drain access he was heading for, led directly into and through that specific, newly acquired parcel of land. It wasn't a random escape. It was a planned exit, using a route that Evelyn Thorne had recently brought under her control. The pieces began to click into place, forming a chilling picture. Ethan shifted his focus to the history of that overgrown parcel and, more specifically, to Evelyn Thorne's personal history. He delved into her past, scouring old newspaper archives, property records, and even obscure local history forums. Evelyn Thorne, he discovered, wasn't originally from Elmwood Pines. She'd moved there after a personal tragedy decades ago, a quiet, almost reclusive existence until she'd risen through the HOA ranks. Her maiden name, however, sent a jolt through him. Evelyn Cross. Cross. Ethan's blood ran cold. He'd seen that name before, buried deep in the police files related to Marcus Thorne's criminal past. Not Marcus's direct family, but an older, less notorious criminal organization Marcus had been loosely associated with years ago. A smuggling ring that used abandoned rural properties and neglected storm drains to move contraband, active almost 2 decades prior. The ringleader of that long-dismantled operation had been a man named Arthur Cross, Evelyn's brother. The twist was gut-wrenching. Evelyn Thorne wasn't just protecting privacy, she was protecting a long-dormant family secret, a hidden pathway, that her criminal brother had once used, and that Marcus Thorne, perhaps unwittingly, had stumbled upon, or worse, been directed towards. The overgrown parcel, the storm drain, her sudden, zealous acquisition of the land, it wasn't about beautification or even control. It was about controlling an escape route, a fallback plan for a family connection, or perhaps for a criminal network that was not as defunct as the police believed. Her brother, Arthur, had been presumed dead in a fiery accident years ago while evading capture. But what if he wasn't? What if he was alive and using the old family roots? Or what if Marcus Thorne was working with surviving members of that Old ring, and Evelyn was still loyal to her brother's legacy? The stakes immediately ratcheted up. Ethan was no longer just a drone operator fighting a petty legal battle. He was poking at a hornet's nest of organized crime, potentially involving a woman who outwardly represented suburban order but secretly harbored dangerous connections. His investigation was no longer just about clearing his name. It was about uncovering a deeply buried conspiracy. He felt the shift, a subtle tightening of the air around him. His online activity suddenly garnered more suspicious advertisements. His phone experienced intermittent static. He dismissed them as paranoia at first, but then, one evening, after returning from a late-night stakeout near the new HOA acquired land, he found his back gate ajar. He always latched it. A cold dread seeped into his bones. Nothing was obviously missing from his house, but the unsettling feeling of being watched, of his personal space being subtly violated, lingered. He checked his security cameras, a brief, almost imperceptible glitch in the feed at the precise time he was away. Someone knew he was digging. Someone had been inside. Evelyn Thorne's rigid adherence to privacy wasn't just a facade. It was a weapon, protecting not just a bylaw, but a long-held, dangerous secret. And now, Ethan was squarely in its crosshairs. Ethan meticulously pieced together the fragments. He uncovered that Evelyn, under the guise of an HOA initiative, had not only acquired the swampy, forgotten parcel of land, but had also pushed through a seemingly innocuous zoning variance years prior. This variance permitted light industrial use on the fringe of the residential area, ostensibly for a fictitious landscaping supply company. In reality, it was a perfectly legal cover for the construction of a small, discreet, and largely underground storage and transit point. The storm drain Marcus Thorne had escaped through wasn't just a convenient exit. It directly connected to a series of subterranean tunnels beneath that light industrial zone, tunnels dating back to her brother Arthur's original smuggling operations. Evelyn hadn't just shielded Marcus. She'd facilitated his escape into a pre-existing, fortified network. Her motive, Ethan theorized, was multi-layered. Loyalty to her deceased, or possibly not-so-deceased brother's legacy was one. But more profoundly, there was likely a financial incentive. The landscaping supply company was clearly a front for illicit activities, a distribution hub for stolen goods, perhaps even narcotics, using the same untraceable routes Arthur Cross had perfected. Marcus Thorne, a known and reckless criminal, had either stumbled upon this network or, more likely, had been an unwitting pawn, sent through the old escape route without fully comprehending its deeper significance or its silent guardian. Evelyn Thorne, the meticulous HOA manager, was effectively the gatekeeper of a modern-day criminal enterprise, meticulously hiding it behind the veneer of suburban order and strict privacy rules. Her fervent insistence on privacy wasn't about protecting homeowners. It was about protecting her illicit operation from any prying eyes, especially those from above. As Ethan got closer, the subtle threats escalated. His internet connection became erratic, not just glitches, but what felt like deliberate interference whenever he accessed specific databases or communications. He found a small, almost invisible GPS tracker magnetically attached to the underside of his car, discarded it, but the chilling realization that he was under constant surveillance lingered. One evening, after a particularly intense session researching Evelyn's property deeds, his apartment building's fire alarm blared, forcing a full evacuation. He later learned it was a false alarm, a sophisticated hack of the building's system. He suspected it was a tactic to get him out of his apartment, to search or perhaps to intimidate. They knew he was digging. He was no longer just a nuisance. He was a target. The stakes shifted from a legal battle to a matter of personal survival. He couldn't go to Captain Davies with mere suspicions and a theory about a decades-old crime family re-emerging. He needed undeniable proof. He needed Marcus Thorne, not just as a fugitive, but as a key to unlocking Evelyn's operation. Ethan knew he couldn't rely on traditional methods. The police were legally hamstrung, and Evelyn Thorne was too well insulated within the community's legal and social structures. He needed irrefutable evidence that connected Evelyn to Thorne's escape and the ongoing criminal enterprise. The only way to get it was to force Evelyn's hand, to make her reveal her true colors, and in doing so, lead him to Marcus Thorne. His plan was audacious, dangerous, and teetered on the edge of legal gray areas. But it was the only way. He would use the very thing Evelyn despised: a drone. Not just any drone, but a resurrected version of his own impounded drone. He'd learned from his legal team that while the physical drone was evidence, the data it contained, and the software he'd built for it, were still his intellectual property. He could rebuild a near-identical drone, load it with advanced surveillance tech, and more importantly, use it as bait. Ethan would craft a false leak, fabricated intelligence suggesting that police had identified a new, highly vulnerable location for a high-value drop or meeting point, a place that only someone with intimate knowledge of Arthur Cross's old network would recognize as a viable alternative to the storm drain tunnels. He would anonymously plant this intel in dark web forums known to be frequented by lower-level associates of Marcus Thorne's type, or even directly email it to a burner account he suspected Marcus might still monitor. The location wouldn't be in Elmwood Pines, but near it, strategically chosen to draw Thorne out of hiding and force him to use the real escape route through Evelyn's property. His new drone, meticulously built with an enhanced stealth mode, advanced thermal imaging, and a high-definition camera with directional audio, would be launched from a hidden location, far from Elmwood Pines. It wouldn't fly over residential properties. Instead, it would position itself to monitor the newly acquired industrial parcel and the storm drain exit. Ethan would also install miniature motion-activated cameras along the perimeter of the obscure land parcel. The goal was to record Marcus Thorne entering or exiting the actual escape route, and more importantly, to capture Evelyn Thorne on camera if she appeared to facilitate or observe his movement. He suspected Evelyn would personally oversee Thorne's entry or exit through her hidden network, especially after his recent escape. Once the drone and ground cameras captured definitive proof of Marcus Thorne using the secret tunnel system, and ideally Evelyn Thorne's direct involvement, Ethan would immediately transmit the live feed and recorded data to Captain Davies. This real-time, irrefutable evidence would bypass all legal ambiguities and force the police to act, raiding the tunnel system and apprehending both Marcus Thorne and Evelyn Thorne, exposing her double life and the full extent of her criminal enterprise. The personal danger was immense. If Evelyn or her associates detected his new drone, or discovered his plan before he had his proof, he wouldn't just be dealing with legal threats anymore. He'd be facing a sophisticated criminal network with a vested interest in silence. He also faced a moral dilemma. Was he crossing a line, operating outside the law to achieve justice? Was he becoming an unofficial vigilante? The police would inevitably be furious with his unauthorized actions, even if they led to a capture. But the frustration of Marcus Thorne's escape and the disturbing truth about Evelyn Thorne left him no other choice. The suburban veneer of Elmwood Pines hid a dark secret, and Ethan was determined to rip it open, no matter the personal cost. The night was a canvas of inky black, punctuated by the distant glow of suburban streetlights. Ethan, perched on a secluded hill overlooking the Elmwood Pines community, felt the familiar hum of his new drone. This wasn't just a piece of technology. It was his last, best hope. His lure had worked. He'd meticulously crafted the fake intel about a police bust at a nearby warehouse, knowing Marcus Thorne, desperate and cornered, would seek the familiar safe passage through Evelyn Thorne's hidden network. Ethan's fingers, steady as a surgeon's, guided the drone. It hugged the tree line, its stealth mode making it virtually invisible against the night sky, its advanced thermal cameras cutting through the darkness like an eagle's eye. Below, the inconspicuous van from his old footage, the one with the crescent-shaped dent, pulled up to the overgrown parcel of land Evelyn Thorne had so fiercely fought to control. A figure emerged, unmistakably Marcus Thorne, moving with a desperate urgency. He fumbled with a hidden latch on what appeared to be a dilapidated shed door, revealing a dark descent. This was it. Ethan's heart hammered against his ribs. He positioned the drone, ensuring it had an unobstructed view of the entry point while simultaneously activating the motion-triggered ground cameras he'd strategically placed earlier. Every pixel, every second of footage was precious. Just as Marcus Thorne was about to disappear into the gloom, another figure emerged from the shadows of a nearby gazebo. Evelyn Thorne herself, impeccably dressed even in the dead of night, her silhouette stark against the faint glow of the Elmwood Pines sign. She wasn't just observing. She was issuing hushed, urgent instructions, her face contorted with a mix of anxiety and cold authority. Marcus Thorne paused, nodded, then plunged into the darkness. Evelyn watched him vanish, then turned, her eyes sweeping the area, a silent, almost predatory gaze. Ethan's drone, a silent witness, captured it all. The fugitive, the hidden entrance, and the HOA manager. Complicit. This was the moment. Ethan didn't hesitate. With a single, decisive command, he initiated the secure data transfer. The live feed, accompanied by precise GPS coordinates and the damning audio of Evelyn's hushed directives, streamed directly to Captain Davies's secure police tablet. A text message, short and sharp, followed, "Proof, Elmwood Pines, now." Minutes later, the quiet suburban night erupted. Police sirens, no longer distant, wailed with ferocious intent. Squad cars converged on the overgrown parcel from multiple directions, lights flashing, cutting through the darkness. Evelyn Thorne, startled by the sudden onslaught, spun around, her face registering pure, unadulterated shock. She ran towards the hidden entrance, screaming something unintelligible, perhaps a warning to Marcus, or a desperate attempt to destroy evidence. Captain Davies, leading the charge, was the first to reach her. "Evelyn Thorne, you are under arrest," he bellowed, his voice laced with a mixture of anger and disbelief. Ethan, now descending the hill, watching the scene unfold, knew this was his cue. He activated the drone's external speaker, its voice cutting through the chaos, amplified and chillingly clear. For obstructing justice, aiding and abetting a fugitive, and operating a criminal enterprise under the guise of an HOA. Evelyn froze, her eyes wide with panic darting between the armed officers and the small, silent drone hovering above. Then she saw Ethan, her face contorted into a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. You meddling fool, you ruined everything. This is my property, my privacy," she shrieked, lunging forward, not at the officers but directly at Ethan, a desperate, futile attempt to silence the truth she now knew he possessed. 2 officers immediately restrained her, her struggles surprisingly fierce for a woman of her composure. "Privacy?" Ethan's voice boomed from the drone, then directly from him as he stepped into the light, his face grim. "You weren't protecting privacy, Evelyn. You were protecting a legacy of crime. The storm drain was your brother Arthur's old smuggling route, wasn't it? The one you've been reactivating right under everyone's noses, using HOA funds and bylaws as your shield." Her composure shattered. Evelyn Thorne, the rigid HOA manager, broke down, screaming obscenities, threats, and desperate denials, her carefully constructed facade crumbling into dust. Simultaneously, tactical units swarmed the hidden entrance, breaching the shed door and descending into the tunnels. Within minutes, a disheveled and disoriented Marcus Thorne was hauled out, blinking in the harsh glare of the police lights, his escape definitively over. The dawn brought a surreal calm to Elmwood Pines, but the community would never be the same. News helicopters hovered, reporters swarmed, and the story of the HOA manager who ran a criminal empire from beneath her manicured lawn exploded onto national headlines. The community was in shock, then outrage. Neighbors who had blindly trusted Evelyn Thorne, or simply feared her bureaucratic wrath, grappled with the profound betrayal. Her meticulous records, her rigid enforcement of bylaws, were now seen as meticulous planning for illicit activities, a twisted form of control. Ethan Vance, once the target of public condemnation and legal threats, was now hailed as a hero. The local news ran segments praising his tenacity, his dedication to justice overriding personal risk. Captain Davies, though stern in his initial reprimand for Ethan's unorthodox methods, publicly credited him with breaking the case, acknowledging that traditional police work might never have uncovered the hidden network. The charges against Ethan for property damage and privacy invasion were swiftly dropped, replaced by apologies and commendations. For Ethan, life had irrevocably changed. He was no longer just a drone enthusiast. He was a proven asset, his unique skills invaluable. Offers poured in from law enforcement agencies, private investigators, and even tech companies eager to harness his expertise. He felt a profound sense of vindication, but also a lingering sadness. The incident had exposed a dark underbelly in a seemingly perfect community, a stark reminder that appearances could be deceiving. The theme of privacy versus public safety, initially a simple conflict, had unmasked a far more complex reality, where privacy was weaponized to conceal grave dangers. Ethan knew his fight wasn't just about catching criminals. It was about ensuring that the pursuit of justice was never stifled by those who twisted rules for their own nefarious ends. He still flew his drones, but now, with a renewed sense of purpose, always vigilant, always ready to pierce through the veil of deception, wherever it might hide.